My name is Charmaine. I am 35 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful software developer, I escaped their toxicity but maintained occasional contact. Last Sunday, they invited me to an upscale brunch to catch up. Between mimosas and avocado toast, my mother leaned forward, smirking. You know, Charmaine, you are lucky we even include you. Pity goes a long way. I simply sipped my coffee and smiled. That night, I logged in, disabled every family credit account, and emailed my lawyer about selling the cabin. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth growing up in Fairfield. Connecticut meant privilege to outsiders. But inside our sprawling colonial home, emotional coldness permeated every corner. Our four-bedroom house with its manicured lawn and heated swimming pool was a fortress of expectations I could never quite meet. My childhood bedroom, painted pale blue, at my mother Elaine's insistence despite my preference for green, became my sanctuary and my prison. From elementary school through high school, I maintained straight A's, joined honor societies, and pushed myself to the absolute limit just to get a nod of approval. It never came. No matter how many coding competitions I won or scholarships I secured, the spotlight always belonged to my younger brother Jamal. Jamal was the golden child. He had the effortless charm, the athletic trophies, and a smile that could get him out of any trouble. While I was treated like the family employee expected to manage the chores, help with his homework, and stay out of the way, Jamal was treated like royalty. My father, Dexter, an insurance broker who valued appearances above all else, constantly praised Jamal as the future of the family. Meanwhile, I was just the quiet girl who was good with computers. They never saw my potential, but they certainly saw the value of my paycheck once I entered the tech industry. By the time I was 28, I was a lead software developer in Manhattan, earning more than my parents combined. Suddenly, their emotional coldness thawed, replaced by a suffocating transactional affection. They called it family duty. I called it being their personal automated teller machine. I paid for Jamal's college tuition after he lost his sports scholarship. I bought the family cabin in upstate New York so my parents could host their wealthy friends. I gave them supplementary credit cards because they convinced me successful Black families build wealth together. I believed them. I wanted their love so desperately that I bought it swipe by swipe. But that brunch last Sunday changed everything. They had invited me not to catch up, but to gloat. Jamal was getting married to Chloe, an aspiring social media influencer who demanded a lavish destination wedding at a historic chateau in France. My parents proudly announced they were covering the $200,000 cost. They spoke about the imported orchids, the five-course French menu, and the designer gowns. When I asked about my flight details, my mother Elaine gave me that smirk. That was when she told me I was lucky they even included me in the brunch, and that pity goes a long way. She explained Chloe felt my energy would ruin the wedding photos. I was not invited to France. My own brother was getting married. They were using my money to fund their lives. And I was not even deemed worthy of a seat at the table. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply sipped my coffee, paid the bill, and smiled. Because they forgot one crucial detail. I am a software developer with complete administrative control over every single financial asset they rely on. That night, I went back to my penthouse. I logged into my banking portals. With a few keystrokes, I lowered the limits on all their supplementary cards to zero. I froze the international transaction capabilities. I emailed my real estate lawyer to put the upstate cabin on the market immediately. And then I waited. I knew they were flying to Paris on Wednesday. I knew the final massive payments for the chateau and the caterers were due the night before the ceremony. It is now Friday night, or rather 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday here in New York. The wedding is supposed to happen today in France. I am sitting on my velvet sofa looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the glowing Manhattan skyline. A glass of expensive red wine rests in my hand. The apartment is perfectly quiet except for the aggressive, relentless vibrating of my phone on the glass coffee table. It started 10 minutes ago. First a single call from my father, then another, then my mother, then Jamal. Now the screen is lit up with 47 missed calls and counting. A flood of text messages and voice notes are pouring in, crashing over each other in sheer panic. I do not rush to pick up. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. If you have ever been the designated cash cow for ungrateful relatives, you know exactly how satisfying this silence feels. The Bank of Charmaine is permanently closed. I lean forward and tap the screen to play the first voice note. The audio crackles and the frantic, echoing voice of my father fills my living room. Charmaine, pick up the phone right now. This is not a joke. We are at the chateau, and the venue management is threatening to lock the gates. They are saying the final payment declined. All of the cards are declining. Jamal's card, your mother's card. Everything is blocked. Fix this emergency immediately. Answer the phone. His voice does not hold a shred of panic for my well-being. It is the demanding, entitled tone of a man who expects the help to fix a plumbing issue. There is no pleas. There is no apology for excluding me. Just an order. I let the voice note end. The phone immediately starts vibrating again. Incoming call from Elaine. I watch her name flash on the screen. The woman who told me pity goes a long way is now desperately calling. I let it ring. It rolls to voicemail. I open the next voice note. This time it is my mother. Her voice is shrill, vibrating with a mixture of fear and fury. Charmaine, I know you are awake. I know you are doing this on purpose because you are bitter and jealous that you were not invited. You are ruining your brother's wedding. The caterers are threatening to walk out. We have 200 guests arriving in 12 hours. Call the bank and authorize the $85,000 charge right now. Stop being a selfish brat and do what you are supposed to do. I actually laugh out loud. The sound bounces off the quiet walls of my apartment. $85,000. They were trying to swipe $85,000 on a card that I pay the bill for to fund a wedding I was banned from attending. The sheer audacity of it is breathtaking. They honestly believed they could treat me like discarded garbage, yet still have full access to my vault. I scroll down to the text messages. Chloe, the bride has sent me a barrage of all caps messages. Why are you doing this? You are evil. Fix the cards now. My dress vendor is here and will not release the gown until the final payment clears. Do not ruin my special day. I take another sip of my wine. The liquid is smooth and rich. I think back to my childhood bedroom, the pale blue walls. I hated the constant feeling of being a guest in my own home. I think about the countless times I sacrificed my own happiness to buy their affection. I think about the late nights studying and the promotions I earned just so my father could brag while ignoring my existence. All of that pain, all of those years of emotional manipulation have led to this exact moment. They are stranded halfway across the world, surrounded by luxury they cannot afford, facing the humiliation they always feared. And the only person who can save them is the daughter they threw away. But I am not the quiet, eager to please little girl anymore. I know my worth, and I know exactly how their systems work. The phone rings again. It is Jamal, the golden child himself. I stare at his smiling contact photo. He has never had to face a single consequence in his entire 30 years of life. Whenever he stumbled, my parents forced me to lay down so he could use me as a bridge. Not tonight. Tonight the bridge is finally gone. I let the phone vibrate across the glass table. Jamal's face flashes brightly on the screen, frozen in a carefully curated smile. He has never had a real job. Not once. While I was pulling all-nighters learning Python and Java to secure my future, Jamal was busy pitching one failed startup after another. He called himself an entrepreneur. My parents called him a visionary. The rest of the world called him exactly what he was, which is unemployed. He met Chloe 2 years ago. She was 28, beautiful, and absolutely obsessed with curating a high society lifestyle she could not afford. Chloe called herself a digital creator, which essentially meant she took photos in expensive restaurants and returned designer clothes after wearing them once. Together, they were a match made in financial delusion. The delusion reached its absolute peak 6 months ago, right in my parents' formal dining room back in Connecticut. They had invited me over for what they called a celebratory family dinner. I should have known it was a trap. The long oak dining table was set with my mother's finest china. Jamal and Chloe sat across from me, beaming from ear to ear. While Chloe waved a massive diamond engagement ring in my face, I congratulated them. I truly did. I even brought a bottle of vintage champagne to celebrate the occasion. But the champagne quickly turned sour when my father cleared his throat, reached under his chair, and handed me a thick cream-colored folder. He said it was the wedding portfolio. I opened it and saw mood boards, fabric swatches, and a detailed financial spreadsheet. The final number at the bottom of the page was exactly $200,000. I stared at the paper, assuming it was a ridiculous joke. $200,000 for a single day. Chloe leaned across the table, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. She explained that a domestic wedding simply would not fit her brand aesthetic. She needed a historic chateau in the French countryside. She needed a custom Vera Wang gown flown in directly from the designer. She needed a string quartet that had played for European royalty and floral arrangements imported directly from the Netherlands. I looked at Jamal, waiting for him to explain how he planned to pay for this absurd fantasy. He simply smiled and looked at our father. Then my father looked at me. He folded his hands on the table and said they were so proud of my recent promotion to lead software developer. He said, family is about lifting each other up. He said it was my turn to invest in my brother's happiness. They wanted me to pay for the entire wedding. They expected me to drain my savings, the money I had painstakingly invested and saved for my own future, to fund a lavish European vacation for a couple who refused to work. This is the reality of the black tax. It is the unspoken suffocating rule in many families that the one who makes it out, the one who achieves financial independence, is suddenly responsible for subsidizing the lives of everyone else. You are no longer treated as a human being with your own goals. You are treated as a retirement plan. You are a safety net. You are an endless well of resources, and the exact moment you stop producing water, you are branded a traitor to your own blood. For years, I had paid that heavy tax. I paid off Jamal's credit cards when his dropshipping business collapsed. I paid for my mother's luxury car lease because she wanted to impress the neighbors. I paid the exorbitant property taxes on the family home. But this time, looking at that $200,000 spreadsheet, something inside me finally snapped. I closed the cream-colored folder and pushed it slowly back across the table. I looked my father directly in the eyes and said no. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. My mother gasped, clutching her linen napkin to her chest, as if I had just slapped her across the face. Jamal's confident smirk vanished, replaced instantly by the petulant pout of a spoiled child being denied a toy. Chloe actually let out a small offended scoff and crossed her arms. My father leaned forward, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. He asked me to repeat myself. I kept my voice perfectly calm and steady. I told him I would not be funding a $200,000 party. I told them I was happy to contribute a reasonable gift, perhaps $5,000, to help with a down payment on a house or a honeymoon, but I would absolutely not drain my life savings for a social media aesthetic. The explosion that followed was spectacular and entirely predictable. My mother stood up her chair, scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. She pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. She called me selfish. She called me ungrateful. She said I was entirely consumed by corporate greed and that my money had turned me into a cold, heartless woman. She reminded me that we are a family, and that in our family we support each other without question. I asked her how Jamal had ever supported me. I asked her when Jamal had ever invested a single dime or a single hour of effort into my success, or if he even knew the exact title of my job. She waved her hand dismissively, screaming that it was different because Jamal had boundless potential and just needed the right launchpad. She said this wedding was his crucial chance to network with high-net-worth individuals, as if a wedding were some sort of corporate summit. Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with fake theatrical tears. She said I was trying to sabotage her special day because I was bitterly jealous. She claimed that because I was 35 and single, I could not bear to see my younger brother find true love before I did. Jamal slammed his fist hard on the oak table, demanding I show some respect to his future wife. It was a masterclass in emotional gaslighting. They were aggressively demanding $200,000 of my hard-earned money, yet somehow I was being painted as the villain for simply saying no. My father stood up towering over the table and delivered his final absolute verdict. He told me that if I could not understand the basic concept of family loyalty, then I had no place participating in their family celebrations. My mother immediately backed him up. She looked down at me with absolute disgust, a look I had seen many times throughout my childhood. She said my negative energy would poison the joyful atmosphere of the wedding. She told me my presence would be a dark cloud over Chloe's perfect photographs. She explicitly stated that if I was not willing to contribute to the family legacy, I was no longer invited to the wedding. I was officially banned, disowned over a destination wedding in France. I remember standing up, grabbing my purse, and walking out the front door without saying another word. I did not cry in the car on the drive back to Manhattan. I did not call a friend to vent about the injustice. I just felt a profound, heavy clarity settling over my chest. They had finally shown me exactly what my role in the family was. I was nothing more than a wallet, and an empty wallet has no place at their dinner table. Following that explosive dinner, the family completely cut me off. They stopped answering my text messages. They did not invite me to Thanksgiving dinner. I spent Christmas entirely alone in my apartment. I was iced out, entirely isolated by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But I knew they were still moving forward with the wedding plans. Through mutual acquaintances and public social media profiles, I saw the constant updates. I saw Chloe posting pictures of her exclusive dress fittings in Paris. I saw Jamal bragging about renting out the entire south wing of the historic chateau. I heard about my parents boasting to their country club friends about the spectacular European wedding their successful son was throwing. I watched it all from a distance, wondering how on earth they were paying for it. I knew my parents had some retirement savings, but certainly not enough to throw away $200,000 in cash without taking on massive debt. I assumed they had taken out a second mortgage on the colonial house. I assumed they had drained every last penny of their retirement accounts to keep up appearances. I had absolutely no idea how deep their deceit actually ran. They maintained that absolute silence until last Sunday, when they suddenly invited me to that upscale brunch I mentioned earlier. They invited me solely to gloat. They wanted to sit across from me, sip their mimosas, and show me that they had found a way to fund the wedding without my permission. They wanted to rub their impending luxury in my face and remind me that I was excluded. They were so incredibly smug, completely unaware that I had already discovered their massive secret days before that brunch. It was not just entitlement driving them. It was not just emotional manipulation. It was a calculated, deliberate, and highly illegal crime against my identity. But I had kept my mouth entirely shut. I smiled over my avocado toast. I let them pack their heavy designer bags. I let them board their expensive first-class flights across the Atlantic Ocean. I let them check into their extravagant French suites and drink vintage champagne on the balcony. I gave them enough rope to hang themselves perfectly, and I waited for gravity to do its job. And now gravity has arrived. The phone on my coffee table stops vibrating for exactly 2 seconds before lighting up again with renewed desperation. This time, it is not a standard phone call or a text message. It is a video FaceTime request from Jamal. The glowing green accept button flashes urgently in the dim light of my living room. They are 3,000 miles away. Standing in the manicured courtyard of a French chateau, wearing custom tailoring, surrounded by furious international vendors demanding immediate payment. The people who told me my negative energy would ruin their aesthetic are now frantically trying to reach me. The mother who uninvited me because I lacked family loyalty is now expecting me to rescue them from a catastrophic foreign disaster. I reach out and pick up the phone. The cool metal feels incredibly grounding against my palm. I adjust my posture on the velvet sofa, making sure the glittering Manhattan skyline is perfectly framed in the background behind me. I want them to see exactly what I have built without them. I want them to see the life they tried to systematically drain dry. I take one last deep, calming breath, relishing this final moment of absolute peace before the storm breaks open. Then I press the green button to accept the FaceTime call. The screen flickers for a fraction of a second, transitioning from my reflection to a scene of absolute, unadulterated chaos. The screen flickers, and my quiet New York apartment is instantly replaced by the shaky, high-definition chaos of the French countryside. The camera jerks wildly for a moment, before stabilizing on Jamal's face. He is sweating profusely. The collar of his custom-tailored tuxedo is unbuttoned, and his usually perfectly groomed hair is sticking up in odd directions. Behind him, the scene is nothing short of a cinematic disaster. They are standing on a sweeping gravel driveway. In the background, I can clearly see the towering wrought iron gates of the chateau. The gates are pulled tightly shut. A heavy brass padlock is actively being secured by a man in a crisp uniform who looks incredibly unsympathetic to their plight. To the left of the frame, several delivery vans are parked with their engines idling. Men in white catering aprons are physically loading crates of champagne and towers of flowers back into the vehicles. The extravagant dream wedding is literally being dismantled in real time. Suddenly, the phone is violently snatched from Jamal's hands. The screen blurs, and then Chloe's face fills the frame. She is a vision of absolute ruin. Her custom Vera Wang gown, the one she bragged about on Instagram for 6 consecutive months, looks heavy and wrinkled. Her meticulously applied bridal makeup has completely surrendered to gravity. Thick black streaks of mascara are running down her cheeks, and her false eyelashes are peeling off at the corners. She is crying, but it is not a cry of sorrow. It is a terrifying, breathless shriek of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "What did you do to the card?" she screams, her voice cracking so loudly that the audio on my phone distorts. "Why is it declining? You did this on purpose out of jealousy. You are a bitter, lonely woman, and you are trying to destroy my wedding, because you have no one." I do not say a single word. I just sit on my velvet sofa holding my phone perfectly still, watching her have a complete psychological meltdown. She points a manicured finger directly at the camera lens, shaking with rage. "Fix it right now!" she demands, stamping her foot on the gravel like a toddler denied a piece of candy. The florist is leaving. The venue manager just locked the gates. They are telling us we cannot even enter the property to retrieve our luggage until the final balance is paid in full. Call your stupid bank, Charmaine. Tell them to authorize the transaction. Do it right now, or I swear to God I will never let you see your future nieces and nephews. The threat is so utterly ridiculous that I actually let out a soft sigh. She is threatening to withhold access to hypothetical children, while simultaneously demanding I pay $85,000 for a party I was explicitly banned from attending. The disconnect from reality is staggering. Before I can formulate a response, my mother pushes her way into the camera frame. Elaine looks completely unhinged. She is wearing a massive, ridiculous fascinator hat adorned with feathers that violently shakes as she speaks. Her face is flushed a deep, angry purple. She completely ignores Chloe's hysterical sobbing and glares directly at me with a look of pure venom. "Charmaine, what is wrong with you?" my mother hisses, her voice vibrating with a terrifying kind of maternal fury. "How dare you pull a stunt like this on your brother's special day? We know you are petty, but we never thought you could be this vindictive. Did you hack the accounts? Did you put a hold on the cards just to punish us for the brunch? You are sick. You need psychological help." She does not ask if there has been a mistake. She does not ask if perhaps there is a fraud alert or a bank error. Her immediate, unwavering assumption is that I have maliciously sabotaged them while completely ignoring the fact that they are attempting to spend my money. It is the ultimate form of gaslighting. They are standing in the wreckage of a fire they started, screaming at me for not providing the water to put it out. My father steps into the frame next. Dexter is always the enforcer of the family. He operates on the delusion that he commands absolute respect and authority, despite having funded his entire lifestyle through my hard work for the past 5 years. He places a heavy hand on Jamal's shoulder, projecting the image of a strong patriarch protecting his heir. "Enough of this nonsense, Charmaine," my father barks, using his deep, authoritative voice, the one he used to terrify me when I was a little girl. "This is not the time for your temper tantrums. We are in a foreign country. We have prominent guests arriving at the local hotels in less than 3 hours. You are embarrassing this family on an international scale." He points towards a man standing in the background. The man is wearing a sharp gray suit and holding a clipboard flanked by two other staff members. That is Monsieur Laurent, the estate manager. My father continues, his tone dripping with condescension. He does not speak much English, but he understands that our payments are bouncing. He is threatening to call the local authorities if we do not settle the $85,000 balance immediately. He thinks we are scammers, Charmaine. Do you understand how humiliating this is for me? Do you understand what you are doing to my reputation? I finally speak. My voice is incredibly calm, contrasting sharply with the frantic energy radiating from my phone screen. Your reputation, I ask quietly. You flew to France for a wedding I was uninvited from, and you are currently locked out of a chateau because you cannot afford the admission ticket. I think your reputation is exactly what it deserves to be. Jamal shoves his way back to the center of the screen. His eyes are wide, darting back and forth nervously. He looks less angry than the others and much more terrified. He knows something the rest of them do not know yet, but he is desperately trying to keep the charade alive. Charmaine, please. Jamal pleads, dropping the aggressive act and pivoting instantly to the role of the helpless victim. Just log into the portal and lift the restriction on the card. I know you put a freeze on it. Just unfreeze it for 24 hours. Let the charge go through. I promise I will pay you back. I have a new investor lined up for my next tech venture. The funding is coming through next month. Just float me this one last time. I am your brother. The lies flow from his mouth like water. He has no investors. He has no tech venture. He has nothing but a rented tuxedo and a fiancée who views him as a human credit card. But what fascinates me the most is the language he uses. Just lift the restriction on the card. He speaks about the card as if it belongs to him, as if it is a shared family asset that I am unfairly hoarding. Elaine pushes Jamal aside again, her patience completely gone. She is practically spitting at the camera. There will be no paying her back, Jamal. She shouts. She owes this to us. She owes this to the family. Charmaine, you listen to me right now. You are going to call the fraud department, verify your identity, and authorize this charge. If you do not do this within the next 5 minutes, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? You will never step foot in our house again. You will not be part of this family. I look at the four of them clustered together on the tiny screen. Chloe sobbing and ruining her designer dress. Jamal sweating and shaking with a hidden terror. Elaine red-faced and violently demanding obedience. Dexter standing tall and trying to intimidate a woman who is thousands of miles out of his reach. They are a perfectly toxic ecosystem. They feed on each other's delusions, enabling the very worst traits in one another, and they use me as the battery to power the entire machine. I watch their faces carefully. The absolute silence on my end is the sweetest symphony I have ever heard. For my entire life, these people have controlled the narrative. They dictated when I was allowed to speak, what I was allowed to feel, and how much of my own success I was permitted to keep. Every interaction was a carefully choreographed dance where I was expected to bow to yield, to open my purse and to apologize for my own existence, but the music has stopped. Look at yourselves. I say, letting the quiet authority in my voice carry across the digital connection. You are standing in the driveway of a French estate, wearing clothes you cannot afford, surrounded by vendors you cannot pay, throwing a tantrum because your designated victim finally walked away. You uninvited me from this wedding because my presence did not fit your aesthetic. You told me I lacked family loyalty. You told me I was lucky to even be allowed at a brunch table with you. Elaine's mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. She tries to muster up her previous outrage, but the sudden shift in my demeanor has completely disarmed her. But we are family, she finally stammers, using the only weapon she has ever known. You cannot just leave us stranded here. The embarrassment will ruin us. Our friends from the country club are already checking into their hotels. What are we supposed to tell them? You can tell them the truth. I reply instantly. You can tell them that you raised a son who refuses to work, and instead of teaching him accountability, you enabled his delusions until they crashed into reality. You can tell them that your daughter, the one you treated like an afterthought, finally realized her worth. Chloe violently pushes her way back to the front, her face practically pressed against the lens. Her eyes are wild, darting around in absolute panic. I do not care about your family drama. She shrieks, completely abandoning the poised, elegant persona she spent years cultivating online. My followers are expecting content. I have sponsorship deals tied to this wedding. If I do not walk down that aisle in the next 4 hours, my brand is dead, Charmaine. I will do anything. I will invite you. I will let you be a bridesmaid. Just please, please fix the card. A bridesmaid. I repeat the word slowly, letting the utter absurdity of it hang in the air. You are offering me a position in a wedding party out of pure financial desperation, as if that is some grand benevolent gesture. You do not want me there, Chloe. You want my credit limit. There is a massive difference, and I am no longer confused about which one it is. My father attempts to regain control of the narrative. He puffs out his chest, trying to project the intimidating presence that used to make me shrink back into my pale blue childhood bedroom. Charmaine, this has gone far enough, he says, his voice low and threatening. I am your father, and I am instructing you to resolve this banking error. We will discuss your grievances when we return to Connecticut, but right now you are jeopardizing the family name. If you do not fix this immediately, the consequences for you will be severe. I look at the man who was supposed to protect me, the man who instead spent my entire life trading my well-being for my brother's comfort. What consequences, Dexter? I ask calmly. Are you going to uninvite me from the holidays again? Are you going to ignore my phone calls? Are you going to tell your friends that I am a terrible daughter? You have already done all of those things. You have already deployed every single weapon in your arsenal to hurt me. You have absolutely nothing left to threaten me with. I am entirely free of you. The estate manager, Monsieur Laurent, steps back into the frame. He has lost all patience. He signals to the security guards standing by the iron gates. The guards begin walking purposefully toward my family. Jamal shrinks back, bumping into Chloe, who lets out a fresh wail of despair. My mother begins to cry. It is not the angry, manipulative crying she usually deploys to get her way. It is genuine, terrified sobbing. Charmaine, please. She begs, her voice breaking. They are going to throw us out into the street. We do not have any other way to pay. Jamal's card was our only option. Please just tell the bank it was a mistake. It was not a mistake, I say. My voice turning to ice, and I know exactly whose card Jamal was trying to use. I shift my gaze directly to my brother. The golden child is visibly trembling now. The arrogant smirk that defined his entire existence has been completely wiped away, replaced by the sheer unadulterated terror of a man standing on the edge of an abyss. You see, I tell them, my eyes locked onto Jamal's panicked face. I am very good at my job. I monitor financial systems for a living. So when you demand that I wire $85,000 to fix a declined card, you are missing the most important part of the equation. Jamal, why do you not explain to our parents exactly why that specific card declined? The chaos of the French courtyard seems to freeze entirely as my family turns their heads to look at Jamal, completely unaware of the devastating revelation that is about to tear their world apart. My father does not give Jamal the chance to speak. Before the silence can even settle over the courtyard, Dexter violently snatches the phone from his son. His large hand covers the lens for a brief, disorienting moment, accompanied by the chaotic sounds of gravel crunching and Chloe continuing to sob in the background. When the image stabilizes, my father's face is taking up the entire screen. His expression is no longer just angry. It is a mask of pure, unyielding authority. He is deploying the exact same look he used when I was a teenager, the look meant to crush any rebellious thought before it could even form in my head. He tells me to stop this nonsense immediately. He says I am acting like a petulant child throwing a tantrum because she did not get her way. He completely ignores my previous comments and delivers a direct, non-negotiable order. He tells me to log into my banking portal or call whoever I need to call and wire $85,000 directly to the chateau's operating account right now. He does not ask me to do this as a favor. He demands it as a tax I owe for being part of this family. He actually gives me a strict time limit, stating that I have exactly 10 minutes to complete the wire transfer before the estate manager calls the local police to formally escort them off the property. I watch him issue these demands with a strange sense of detachment. It is truly a masterclass in gaslighting. Here they are standing in the middle of a massive financial catastrophe of their own making, yet my father is speaking to me as if I am the one who committed a crime. He tells me to stop being bitter. He looks straight into the camera, his voice dripping with forced patience, and says that blood is blood. He tells me my brother needs me, and that is the only thing that should matter to a decent human being. He lectures me about the sacrifices generations of black families have made to build a legacy, deliberately twisting our cultural history to justify his son's financial recklessness. He speaks as if me paying for this wedding is my sacred duty to our ancestors, rather than a desperate shakedown by a spoiled 30-year-old man. My mother pushes her face next to his, nodding vigorously. Elaine chimes in, her voice shrill and accusatory. She tells me that holding a grudge over a simple wedding invitation is beneath me. She says that real women, strong women, put their family's survival above their own bruised egos. She actually has the audacity to tell me that God is watching how I treat my flesh and blood in their hour of need. They are using every emotional trigger they installed in me since childhood: guilt, shame, duty, and the fear of divine retribution. In the past, this combination of manipulation would have broken me instantly. I would have scrambled to my laptop, tears blinding my eyes, typing in my account, routing numbers just to stop them from looking at me with such profound disappointment. But today, their words just bounce off an invisible armor. I am not the insecure girl who needs their validation anymore. I am a woman who understands numbers, and numbers do not lie no matter how much emotional manipulation you wrap around them. I take another calm sip of my wine, leaning back into the soft velvet of my sofa. I tell my father that his speech about blood and duty is very moving, but it completely fails to address the fundamental mathematical problem currently happening in that courtyard. I ask him to stop yelling for exactly 1 minute and actually use his brain. I speak to him the way I would speak to a junior developer who brought me a deeply flawed line of code. I lay out the cold, hard facts. I remind them that Jamal is 30 years old. I point out that my dear brother has not received a legitimate W-2 tax form in over 5 years. His last business venture, a luxury sneaker reselling company, ended with him defaulting on a $10,000 loan that I ended up paying off to save his credit score. I remind them that Jamal currently lives in a rented apartment that they co-signed for, and he drives a car that is registered in my mother's name. Furthermore, I point out that his personal checking accounts are perpetually overdrawn. I list these facts methodically, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I am simply presenting the data. I tell them that as a software developer who deals with complex financial algorithms and banking security architectures every single day, I understand exactly how credit limits are calculated, and the numbers simply do not add up. Then I ask the question that they are so desperately trying to avoid. How does a man with zero verifiable income, zero assets, and a history of defaulting on microloans suddenly secure a premium credit line with an $85,000 limit? Furthermore, how did he secure a card capable of covering a $200,000 international wedding? I ask my father to explain the underwriting process to me. I ask him what bank in their right mind would look at Jamal's financial history and hand him a black card. The reaction is instantaneous and deeply telling. Instead of looking confused or turning to Jamal to demand an answer, my parents go on the offensive. They aggressively try to dodge the question. My father raises his voice, attempting to talk over me. He says this is not the time for an audit. He tells me I am deliberately stalling because I enjoy seeing them suffer. He claims that Jamal is a resourceful entrepreneur and that I simply do not understand how modern venture capital works. He says Jamal secured private funding from a silent partner who believes in his vision, and that the bank simply put a temporary security hold on the account because it is an unusually large international charge. It is a pathetic, transparent lie. A silent partner funding a wedding. I almost laugh at the sheer absurdity of the excuse. But Elaine jumps right in, backing up the ridiculous story. She screams that I am trying to embarrass Jamal in front of his future wife. She points at Chloe, who is currently leaning against a stack of Louis Vuitton luggage, weeping uncontrollably. Elaine tells me to look at what I'm doing to the poor bride. She says the details of Jamal's finances are absolutely none of my business and that my only concern right now should be fixing the immediate crisis. Chloe suddenly stops crying long enough to scream at the phone. She demands that I send the wire transfer right now. She promises that if I just send the money, she will personally guarantee that Jamal pays me back the moment they return to America. She even promises to promote my software company on her social media pages as a gesture of goodwill. The sheer delusion of offering me an Instagram shoutout in exchange for $85,000 is staggering. They are cornered, panicked animals, just throwing whatever lies and hollow promises they can find against the wall, hoping something will stick long enough for me to open my vault. My father tries one last intimidation tactic. He tells me that if I wire the money now, we can sit down like civilized adults back in Connecticut and review all the financial documents together. He promises to show me the statements. He promises complete transparency. But he insists that right now, the only acceptable action is my total obedience. Send the money, Charmaine, he growls, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Send the money and ask your questions later. That is an order from your father. Do not force me to disown you over a misunderstanding. I look at the screen. Jamal is standing slightly behind our father. He is the only one not yelling. He is the only one not making demands. He is staring at me with a look of absolute hollow terror. He is sweating so heavily that it is soaking into the collar of his expensive white shirt. He knows. He knows that I know. He is watching his parents fight a war they have already lost, armed with lies that are about to detonate right in their faces. I let the silence stretch out. I let them exhaust themselves with their screaming and their demands and their ridiculous ultimatums. I watch them panting, staring at the screen, waiting for me to break. They genuinely believe that if they just push hard enough, if they just yell loud enough, the old Charmaine will surface and hand over the key to her life savings. But that woman does not exist anymore. She died the day they told her she was not allowed to attend her own brother's wedding because her presence would ruin the aesthetic. I lean closer to the camera. I make sure my face is perfectly illuminated by the soft light of my apartment. I tell my father that I am not sending a single dollar. I tell him that I will not wire the money now, and I will not look at his fake financial documents later. I tell Elaine that God is indeed watching, and he is about to see exactly what happens when you build a life on stolen foundations. I tell Chloe that her personal brand is about to get a lot of engagement, but it will absolutely not be the kind she wants. And then I turn my attention entirely to my brother. I call his name, Jamal. My voice is sharp and clear, slicing right through the lingering noise of the French courtyard. Jamal flinches physically as if I had just struck him with a whip. I tell him that our parents are very creative with their excuses. A silent partner, venture capital, a temporary security hold. I say the words slowly, letting the mockery drip from every single syllable. I tell him it is a fascinating story, but I tell him that he and I both know the bank did not flag that card because of an international charge. I tell him the bank flagged that card because the person whose name is actually on the account called the fraud department and reported it stolen. My father frowns, genuine confusion finally breaking through his mask of anger. He looks at Jamal, then back at the phone. "What are you talking about, Charmaine?" He asks, his voice losing a fraction of its booming confidence. "Whose card?" I take a deep breath. The moment has arrived. The moment I have been waiting for since I opened that bank portal and saw the devastating truth hidden in the data. The moment I stop being the victim and become the architect of their ruin. I look directly into the camera, staring straight through the digital connection right into the heart of my toxic family. My gaze away from the phone screen and look directly at the massive dual monitors dominating my home office setup in the corner of the living room. The screens cast a cool blue light across the dark hardwood floor. I reach out and tap my keyboard to wake the system. Rows of encrypted financial data instantly fill the displays. As a lead software developer specializing in high-level banking security and fraud detection architectures, I do not just look at bank statements. I look at the raw source code of financial behavior. I look at IP addresses, device identification markers, and geolocation pings. I look at the absolute undeniable truth. I hold the phone up so the camera captures a glimpse of the glowing monitors behind me. I want them to see the command center that is currently dismantling their entire reality. I speak with the slow, deliberate cadence of a judge reading a final verdict. Jamal, I say, letting his name hang in the heavy air. You told Mom and Dad that your card was declining because of an unexpected international security hold. You told them you had a silent venture capital partner funding this $200,000 wedding. But that is not what my system shows. So why do you not read the last four digits of that card out loud for everyone to hear? The silence that falls over the French courtyard is absolute. Even Chloe stops her hysterical sobbing for a moment, sensing the sudden terrifying shift in the atmosphere. The heavy brass padlock on the chateau gates clinks in the wind, the only sound breaking the tension. Jamal looks like he has been physically struck. His skin loses all its color, turning a sickly ashen gray. He opens his mouth, but no words come out. His eyes dart frantically around, looking for an exit that does not exist. My father loses his patience. He grabs Jamal by the shoulder and shakes him roughly. Just tell her the numbers, Jamal. My father barks, his voice tight with rising anxiety. Stop playing games and read the numbers so she can authorize the wire transfer. Jamal swallows hard. His Adam's apple bobs nervously against his tight collar. He still refuses to speak. He simply lowers his head, staring down at the expensive gravel beneath his custom leather shoes. Since my brother has suddenly lost his ability to speak, I will do it for him. I announce, turning my attention fully back to my left monitor. I type a quick command into the secure terminal and pull up the master file. The card in question is a premium-tier corporate black card issued by a major international bank. The last four digits are 7249. I pause. Letting the numbers register, then I deliver the first fatal blow. That card does not belong to a silent partner, I state clearly. And it certainly does not belong to you, Jamal. That card belongs to a limited liability company registered in the state of New York under the name Charmaine Tech Solutions. My mother squints at the phone screen, her face twisting in genuine confusion. Charmaine Tech Solutions. She repeats the words slowly as if tasting them for the first time. Why would Jamal have a corporate card for your company? Did you give him a company card to help with the wedding expenses? Her desperation to find an innocent explanation is almost tragic. She is still desperately clinging to the illusion that her son is just a misunderstood victim of my corporate greed. She cannot fathom the darkness he is actually capable of. I did not give him anything. I reply, my voice dropping an octave, becoming colder and sharper. I have never owned a company called Charmaine Tech Solutions. I am an employee of a tech firm. I do not have an LLC. That company is a ghost entity. It was registered 4 months ago, right around the time Chloe decided she absolutely had to have a historic chateau for her wedding venue. The pieces are finally starting to fall into place for my parents. I can see the dawn of horror breaking across my father's face. The arrogant posture he held just moments ago begins to crumble. Jamal took the liberty of creating that company. I continue mercilessly driving the point home. And since a ghost company with zero revenue cannot qualify for an elite corporate black card with a massive credit limit, he needed a guarantor. He needed someone with a flawless credit history, zero debt, and a high verifiable income. He needed me. I lean closer to the microphone, making sure every single syllable is crystal clear. My brother went into the filing cabinet in your home office in Connecticut, the one where you keep all our old tax returns and medical records. He found my social security number. He used my social security number, my home address, and my forged signature to establish a fake corporate entity. He then used my flawless credit profile to apply for that premium black card. Chloe gasps loudly. She drops her designer clutch, and the sound of it hitting the gravel is sharp and loud. She turns to stare at Jamal, her eyes wide with shock. For all her vanity and entitlement, even she seems to comprehend the catastrophic magnitude of what I am saying. Jamal, Chloe whispers, her voice trembling. Tell me she is lying. Tell me you did not commit fraud to pay for my dress. Jamal refuses to look at her. He just keeps staring at the ground, his shoulders shaking. His silence is the loudest confession possible. It is not just fraud, Chloe. I correct her smoothly, maintaining my absolute composure. It is federal identity theft. It is the fraudulent use of a social security number. It is bank fraud. And because you are currently standing in Europe attempting to run an $85,000 charge across international borders, it officially qualifies as international wire fraud. The words land like heavy stones in the courtyard. Identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud. These are not minor misunderstandings. These are not family disagreements that can be smoothed over with a forced apology at Thanksgiving dinner. These are severe felonies that carry mandatory minimum sentences in federal prison. You did not think this through, Jamal, I say, addressing him directly. You thought because I always bailed you out in the past, I would just swallow this too. You thought I would be so terrified of ruining the family name that I would quietly pay off the balance and pretend it never happened. You thought you could literally steal my identity, drain my credit, and use it to throw a $200,000 party that you banned me from attending. My father is breathing heavily. His chest heaves under his tailored suit jacket. He steps directly in front of the camera, blocking Jamal from view. His face is pale, but his jaw is locked tight. Charmaine, Dexter says, his voice completely stripped of its previous booming authority. It is a hoarse, desperate whisper. Are you absolutely sure? Is it possible there is a mix-up? Maybe someone else stole your information and Jamal just happened to use a compromised card. Even now, facing the undeniable truth, he is trying to invent an escape hatch for his golden boy. He is trying to construct a reality where Jamal is an innocent victim of circumstance. There is no mix-up, Dexter, I reply coldly, dropping the title of Dad. I traced the IP address used to submit the credit application. It was submitted from the Wi-Fi network at your house in Fairfield. I pulled the device identification data. It was submitted from Jamal's personal MacBook, the same MacBook I bought for him 2 years ago when he claimed he needed it to start a graphic design business. The digital fingerprints are everywhere and they all point directly to your son. The absolute finality of my statement shatters whatever remaining illusions they held. My mother lets out a sharp, devastated wail. She covers her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with terror as she stares at Jamal. The golden child, the brilliant entrepreneur, the future of the family legacy has just been exposed as a common, desperate criminal. He stole my identity to fund a lie. I tell them, my voice ringing with righteous clarity. He stole my future to buy imported orchids and a string quartet. And the most pathetic part is that he actually thought he was smart enough to get away with it. He thought he could outsmart the lead software developer of the very financial security systems he was trying to bypass. Jamal finally breaks. He falls to his knees on the sharp gravel. The expensive fabric of his tuxedo pants tears, but he does not seem to notice. He grabs the phone from my father's hands, bringing the camera terrifyingly close to his face. He is weeping openly now. Heavy, ugly tears stream down his face, mixing with the sweat on his forehead. Charmaine, I am so sorry. Jamal begs, his voice cracking violently. I panicked. Chloe wanted this wedding so badly, and Dad was bragging to everyone at the country club, and I did not have the money. The startup failed. Everything failed. I just needed to borrow your credit for a few months. I was going to figure out a way to pay it back. I swear to God I was going to pay it back. You were going to pay back $200,000 with what income I ask, quietly refusing to offer him even a shred of sympathy. You do not have a job. You do not have assets. You had no plan. Your only plan was to use me until there was nothing left. Please. He sobs, clutching the phone with both hands. Please, Charmaine. Just authorize this final charge. Let us get through the wedding. When we get back to the States, I will sign whatever you want. I will go bankrupt. I will give you everything. Just do not let them lock us out. Do not call the police. You are my sister. He plays the family card one last time. The ultimate trump card that has always forced my compliance. But as I look at his tear-stained face, I feel absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, no familial obligation. The emotional cord that tied me to this toxic dynamic has been completely and permanently severed. I lean back in my chair and take a slow sip of my wine. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to sit in the agony of his own making. I look past Jamal, looking at the towering chateau, the locked gates, the panicked vendors, and the shattered expressions of my parents. They built this beautiful hollow lie, and now they are trapped inside it. I am not going to authorize the charge, Jamal. I state my voice perfectly calm and completely devoid of mercy. Jamal lets out a sound that is half gasp, half scream. But before he can launch into another round of pathetic begging, I raise my hand, stopping him dead in his tracks. And I am not going to call the police, I add smoothly. A collective sigh of relief seems to ripple through the French courtyard. My mother drops her hands from her face, letting out a shaky breath. My father's shoulders slump in visible relief. Even Chloe stops crying, looking up with a sudden spark of frantic hope. They think they have won. They think the crisis has been averted, that the worst is over, and that they can somehow salvage this disaster. They think I am sparing them. They think the old Charmaine has returned to save the day. But they are completely wrong. I lean forward, resting my elbows on the desk, bringing my face close to the camera. A cold, sharp smile spreads across my lips. I am not calling the police, Jamal. I repeat the words slowly, letting them savor the false comfort before I rip it entirely away, because I do not need to. Because the bank's automated federal compliance algorithms already did it for me. I explain, keeping my tone light, almost conversational. When you attempt to process an $85,000 charge in a foreign country on an account that was flagged for identity theft less than 24 hours prior, it bypasses local security. It triggers a mandatory, automated report to federal authorities. I did not have to dial a single number, Jamal. You pressed the button all by yourself. The brief flicker of hope in their eyes is instantly extinguished, replaced by a suffocating terror. Jamal physically recoils, dropping the phone onto the gravel. The screen tumbles, showing a dizzying blur of the sky and the chateau walls before someone snatches it up. It is my mother. Elaine's face fills the frame, but she does not look at Jamal with disgust. She does not scream at the son who just confessed to committing a federal felony and dragging their family name through the mud. Instead, she turns her absolute unhinged fury entirely on me. You planned this. Elaine snarls, her eyes wide and wild. You knew he was using that card, and you waited until we were completely vulnerable to spring this trap. You are a monster, Charmaine. I stare at her, genuinely marveling at the Olympic-level mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion. I am a monster. I ask, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cuts through the speaker perfectly. Your son stole my social security number, forged my signature, opened a fraudulent corporate account, and racked up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in my name. And your reaction is to call me a monster. He did not steal anything. Elaine screams, her voice echoing shrilly off the stone walls of the French estate. He just borrowed your good credit. You have a perfect credit score and plenty of money sitting in the bank doing absolutely nothing. He is your brother. He is young and trying to build a network. Family is supposed to share resources. He was going to pay it back. The sheer breathtaking audacity of her words hangs in the air. Borrowed my good credit, as if a social security number is a sweater you borrow from a sibling's closet. She is standing in the middle of a collapsing criminal enterprise, and she is genuinely defending it as a family resource-sharing initiative. You have more money than you know what to do with. Elaine continues, her face flushed with righteous indignation. You live in a luxury penthouse. You take vacations to resorts. Meanwhile, Jamal has been struggling to find his footing. It is completely unfair that one child has so much while the other is struggling. You were supposed to pay for this wedding anyway, Charmaine. If you had just done your duty as a daughter and written the check when your father asked you to, Jamal would never have been forced to take such desperate measures. This entire situation is your fault. I sit back on my velvet sofa, completely stunned into silence. I let her words wash over me, analyzing them not with emotion, but with the cold, calculating precision of my profession. She is not speaking out of panic. This is not a momentary lapse in judgment caused by stress. This is her core belief system. This is the absolute truth of how my mother views the world. In her eyes, my success does not belong to me. My hard work, the late nights, the sacrifices, the promotions I fought tooth and nail to secure, none of it is mine. It is communal property. It is a family asset that exists solely to subsidize Jamal's failures. And because I refused to hand it over willingly, She believes Jamal was completely justified in taking it by force. Unfreeze the account right now, Elaine demands, pointing a trembling finger at the camera. Call your colleagues at the bank. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you authorized the company and gave him permission to use the card. If you clear this up right now, we can stop the authorities from getting involved. You can fix this, Charmaine. Chloe steps into the frame behind my mother, nodding aggressively. Yes, just tell them you gave him permission. Chloe begs, her makeup still smeared across her face. If you do not do this, they will put him in jail. They will cancel the wedding. My entire life will be ruined, and it will be entirely your fault. Do you really want to live with the guilt of destroying your own brother's life over money? My father steps up next to them. The patriarch, the man who is supposed to lead with integrity. He looks at me with a heavy, disappointed sigh, playing the role of the weary peacemaker. Charmaine, listen to your mother. Dexter says, his voice thick with manipulation. We know Jamal made a poor decision. He made a mistake. But we do not throw family away over a mistake. You have the power to make this right. Pick up the phone, call the fraud department, and tell them the charges are valid. We will handle Jamal's discipline internally when we get home. Handle his discipline internally. I repeat the phrase, tasting the absolute rot of it. You mean you will yell at him for getting caught and then expect me to pay the monthly minimums on an $85,000 credit card bill for the next 10 years? That is exactly what they mean, and we all know it. I look at the three of them clustered around the phone, my mother practically vibrating with rage and entitlement, my father hiding his enabling behavior behind the guise of family unity, and Chloe a parasite trying to attach herself to a host that is already being bled dry. Jamal is lingering in the background, too cowardly to face me himself, letting his parents fight his battles, just like he has done every single day of his life. And in that exact moment, something fundamental shifts inside my chest. For 35 years, I have carried a heavy invisible cord, connecting me to these people. It was woven from childhood desperation, the endless agonizing hope that if I just achieved enough, earned enough, or gave enough, they would finally look at me the way they look at Jamal. I spent my entire life trying to buy a seat at a table where I was never welcome. I let them belittle me. I let them use me. I let them convince me that the emotional coldness I felt was somehow my own fault, a defect in my character that could only be cured through absolute submission. But watching my mother aggressively defend a federal crime because it benefited her favorite child, that invisible cord does not just fray, it snaps. It severs completely, violently, and permanently. I realize with crystal clarity that they do not view me as a daughter, a sister, or even a human being. They view me as a host. I am a biological automated teller machine, an endless reservoir of resources meant to be leached off until there is absolutely nothing left. And a parasite does not love its host. A parasite does not feel gratitude for the blood it drains. It simply consumes, demands more, and becomes enraged when the supply is threatened. The realization should be devastating. It should bring me to my knees. It should make me weep for the family I never truly had. But surprisingly, there are no tears. There is no grief. Instead, a profound, chilling emptiness washes over me, quickly replaced by something much darker and far more powerful. I stop feeling like the victim. I stop feeling like the rejected daughter. I shift entirely into predator mode. The panicked shouting from the phone screen sounds distant now, like the buzzing of trapped insects. My mother is still screaming about my selfishness. Chloe is still crying about her ruined aesthetic. My father is still barking orders about family loyalty. I let them make their noise. I observe them with the cold, detached fascination of a scientist studying a dying organism under a microscope. Are you listening to me? Elaine screeches, banging her fist against her own leg in frustration. I said unfreeze the card right now. This is not a negotiation, Charmaine. We are your family, and you will do as you are told. I lean closer to the monitor, the blue light illuminating my face. My posture is perfectly relaxed. My expression is entirely devoid of anger, sadness, or fear. The complete absence of emotion in my face seems to finally register with them because their shouting slowly tapers off into a confused, heavy silence. You want me to lie to a federal banking institution? I say, my voice smooth and lethal. You want me to commit perjury, falsify corporate documents, and make myself an accessory to international wire fraud? All so Jamal does not have to face the consequences of his own actions. It is not lying. My father argues weakly, though his confidence is visibly crumbling under my deadpan stare. It is protecting the family. No, Dexter. I correct him softly. It is protecting Jamal. You have never protected this family. You have only ever protected him. And you have done it by constantly sacrificing me. I look directly at my mother. Her chest is heaving, her eyes darting around the courtyard as the reality of the situation begins to set in. The estate manager is walking toward them again, this time flanked by two men who look remarkably like local law enforcement. You said I was supposed to pay for this wedding anyway. I tell her, my words clipping through the air like bullets. You said that if I had just done my duty, he would not have had to steal from me. That is the most fascinating piece of logic I have ever heard. You have justified his crime by blaming the victim for not volunteering to be robbed. Elaine opens her mouth to argue, too. But I cut her off instantly, my voice cracking like a whip. Do not speak. I command. The absolute authority in my tone shocks her into silence. She closes her mouth, staring at me as if she is looking at a stranger. And she is. The obedient, desperate daughter is gone. You called me a monster. I continue, resting my chin on my folded hands. You said I am vindictive. You said I planned this. Let me be perfectly clear about something, Elaine. If I were truly a monster, I would have canceled that card the minute he booked the flights. I would have let you discover the fraud while you were sitting in your colonial house in Connecticut, where you have resources, lawyers, and your country club friends to comfort you. I pause, letting my eyes sweep over the chaotic scene behind them. The locked gates, the furious vendors, the approaching authorities. But I did not do that. I say, a genuine, chilling smile finally touching the corners of my mouth. I waited. I watched the transactions ping on my server. The plane tickets, the hotel deposits, the custom dress fittings. I let you fly an ocean away. I let you invite 200 guests. I let you dress up in your expensive clothes and stand in the courtyard of a French estate you cannot afford. I let you climb all the way to the absolute peak of your delusion before I pulled the ladder away. Chloe lets out a horrified gasp, backing away from the phone, as if it might physically bite her. Jamal is still on his knees, weeping silently into his hands. My father looks physically ill. You want to know what a monster looks like? I ask, my voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly calm. A monster is a mother who watches her son steal her daughter's identity and then demands the daughter apologize for catching him. You are right about one thing, Elaine. Family is supposed to share resources. But you have exhausted my resources. The bank is empty, the vault is sealed, and the debt is finally coming due. I stop speaking entirely. I simply lean back against the plush velvet cushions of my sofa, cross my legs, and offer them a smile. It is not a warm smile. It is not a smile of reconciliation or understanding. It is a cold, sharp, and highly calculated expression. It is the smile of a chess player who just watched their opponent confidently walk directly into a checkmate. On the phone screen, the chaotic energy of the French courtyard grinds to an absolute halt. The screaming stops. The desperate begging dies in their throats. My mother, my father, Jamal, and Chloe all stare at me through the digital connection, completely paralyzed. They are waiting for me to yell back. They are waiting for me to hurl insults, to cry, to show some sign of emotional distress that they can manipulate. But I give them absolutely nothing except that steady, unblinking smile. They did not know why I was smiling. They thought I had just discovered this massive betrayal tonight, triggered by the frantic phone calls and the declined credit card. They thought I was reacting to a sudden crisis, making rash, emotionally driven decisions in the heat of the moment. They fundamentally misunderstood who I am and what I do for a living. To my family, my job title was just a convenient way to extract money. They knew I worked in technology. They knew I built software for financial institutions, but they never actually bothered to understand the nature of my work. They never asked about the specifics. If they had, Jamal might have thought twice before attempting to bypass the exact security systems I helped design. As a lead software developer specializing in high-level banking security and fraud detection, my daily life does not involve simply fixing glitches or updating user interfaces. I build digital tripwires. I write complex algorithms designed to analyze thousands of data points per second. My code looks for anomalies. It looks for sudden shifts in spending behavior, mismatched geolocation tags, and subtle inconsistencies in biometric verifications. I design the traps that catch international financial criminals. I do not just monitor transactions, I actively hunt discrepancies. So when Jamal decided to steal my social security number, forge my signature, and establish a fraudulent corporate entity, he did not just commit a crime against a random citizen. He walked into the digital fortress that I personally manage. I keep the cold smile on my face as I lean forward again, bringing myself closer to the camera. The blue light from my dual monitors reflects in my eyes. Do you honestly think I just found out about this tonight? I asked them, my voice smooth and perfectly measured. Do you think I was asleep in my bed, completely oblivious until you started blowing up my phone with your demands? My father blinks rapidly, his mind struggling to process the implication of my words. What are you saying? He asks cautiously, as if my words are physical landmines he is trying to navigate. I am saying that I have known about Charmaine Tech Solutions for 8 days. I reply. The collective gasp from the four of them is incredibly satisfying. Chloe covers her mouth with a trembling hand. Jamal looks as though he is going to be physically sick right there on the expensive gravel. 8 days ago, on a quiet Thursday evening, one of my secondary security algorithms flagged a soft credit inquiry on my personal social security number. I explained, taking my time with the details, forcing them to listen to the exact methodology of their own destruction. It was an inquiry from a premium corporate credit issuer. I found it strange, considering I had not applied for any new lines of credit, so I dug into the data. It took me less than 15 minutes to trace the application back to the IP address at the Fairfield house. It took me another 5 minutes to pull the incorporation documents for the LLC and see my own forged signature sitting next to Jamal's name as the secondary authorized user. My mother shakes her head violently in denial. No, she whispers. If you knew last week, why did you not say anything? Why did you not call us immediately? I look directly at Elaine, letting the full weight of her past cruelty hang between us. Because of the brunch, I answer simply. I remind her of that beautiful Sunday afternoon just 3 days after I discovered the massive fraud. I remind her of how she invited me to that upscale restaurant under the guise of catching up. I walked into that restaurant knowing exactly what Jamal had done. I sat across the table from my family, fully aware that they had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars of my credit. I sat there, sipping my coffee, waiting to see if any of them had the basic human decency to confess. I gave them one final opportunity to come clean, to apologize, to show even a shred of remorse or familial love. Instead, what did you do, Elaine? I ask, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You drank your mimosa and told me I was lucky you even included me. You told me pity goes a long way. You told me my negative energy would ruin Chloe's wedding aesthetic, and you officially banned me from attending. You looked me in the eyes and treated me like absolute garbage, all while planning to use my stolen identity to fund your luxury vacation. The color completely drains from my mother's face. The memory of her own arrogance played back to her in the context of this devastating revelation finally shatters her defensive shell. She realizes that while she thought she was expertly manipulating the ugly duckling of the family, I was quietly holding the detonator to her entire life. You could have stopped us. Jamal chokes out his voice, a pathetic, watery mess. You could have canceled the card before we left Connecticut. You could have stopped the wedding before it even started. I could have. I agree, nodding slowly. If I had canceled the card last Thursday, the bank would have simply closed the account. They would have written it off as an attempted fraud, flagged your name domestically, and that would have been the end of it. You would have been embarrassed, the wedding would have been quietly downsized. And mom and dad would have spent the next 10 years making excuses for your behavior while blaming me for being unsupportive. You would have faced zero real consequences. I paused, letting my eyes sweep over the magnificent towering walls of the French chateau in the background of their screen. The stone architecture is beautiful, bathed in the afternoon sun. It is the perfect setting for a trap. But I decided you needed to learn a permanent lesson. I continue, my voice steady and resolute. So I did absolutely nothing. I let the account remain active. I watched from my monitors here in New York as you purchased 5 first-class tickets to Charles de Gaulle Airport. I watched the initial deposit clear for the chateau. I watched Chloe swipe the card for her custom Vera Wang gown. I watched you pay the florists and the caterers. I let you board that plane, cross the Atlantic Ocean, and check into your extravagant suites. Why? Chloe screams, her voice cracking in pure agony. Why would you let us get all the way over here just to do this? Because geography matters, Chloe. I explain, adopting the tone of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. When you commit fraud within the United States, it is a serious issue. But when you cross international borders and attempt to execute a massive fraudulent transaction on foreign soil, it elevates the crime to a completely different federal level. I tap the edge of my wine glass against my fingernail, the sharp clinking sound echoing through the speaker. I knew the exact schedule of your payments. I knew that the venue manager, Monsieur Laurent, required the final $85,000 balloon payment to be processed precisely 12 hours before the ceremony. I knew that once you were physically in France, completely reliant on that specific black card, you would have absolutely no backup plan when the floor fell out from under you. My father takes a step backward, leaning heavily against a stack of luggage for physical support. He is looking at me as if I am a stranger. He is looking at me with genuine fear. He finally understands the terrifying depth of the intellect he spent his entire life underestimating. So I waited. I say, bringing the story to its devastating conclusion. I waited until you were dressed in your tailored suits. I waited until the guests were arriving. I waited until the absolute peak of your arrogance and entitlement. And the exact minute Jamal handed that stolen card to Monsieur Laurent to process the final $85,000 charge, I pushed a single button on my keyboard. I did not just decline the transaction. I triggered a priority international fraud alert. I flagged the card as stolen, reported the corporate entity as a synthetic identity fabrication, and geolocated the physical presence of the card to your exact coordinates in the French countryside. The silence that follows my explanation is heavy and suffocating. The four of them are completely immobilized by the sheer scale of the trap they willingly walked into. They did not just stumble into a crisis. They were expertly maneuvered into a federal disaster by the woman they considered to be nothing more than a convenient ATM. You planned every single second of this, my father whispers, his voice devoid of any strength or authority. I planned nothing, Dexter. I correct him sharply. You built the guillotine. You sharpened the blade. You laid your own heads on the block. All I did was refuse to stop the blade from falling. I look at their terrified, shattered faces, and I feel a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The emotional debt has been completely wiped clean. I owe them absolutely nothing. The heavy sound of approaching footsteps crunches loudly on the gravel behind them. The estate manager has returned, and this time he is not alone. The situation in the courtyard is about to escalate beyond their wildest nightmares, and I am sitting comfortably in the front row holding the remote control. The figures stepping into the frame behind my family are wearing the distinctive dark blue uniforms of the French National Gendarmerie. They are not local security guards hired for crowd control. They are armed federal police officers. Monsieur Laurent stands slightly behind them, his face a mask of furious European professionalism, pointing a stiff finger directly at Jamal. The officers move with deliberate tactical precision, their hands resting cautiously near their duty belts. My father, the man who has spent my entire life projecting an aura of impenetrable strength, physically shrinks. He takes another step backward, completely abandoning his defensive position in front of Jamal. He bumps into the Louis Vuitton luggage stacked near the gate, knocking over a pristine white hat box. Elaine grabs his arm, her manicured nails digging so deeply into his expensive suit jacket that I can see her knuckles turning white through the pixelated screen. Chloe lets out a sound that I can only describe as the noise a dying animal makes, a high-pitched, breathless squeal of pure terror. Jamal remains on his knees. He does not even try to stand up when the officers approach. He just stares at their polished black boots crunching on the gravel inches from his face. I watch the French officers begin speaking. Their voices are muffled by the wind and the distance from the phone, but the universal tone of law enforcement is unmistakable. They are issuing commands. They are asking for identification. "Look at me," I say. My voice is not loud, but it cuts through the escalating panic in the courtyard with surgical precision. "I want you all to look at the screen right now." My father slowly turns his head, tearing his eyes away from the police officers to look back at his phone. His face has aged 10 years in the span of 5 minutes. Elaine follows suit, her jaw trembling uncontrollably. Even Jamal tilts his head up, his tear-streaked face a portrait of absolute defeat. "You still do not understand the magnitude of what is happening," I tell them, leaning forward until my face dominates their view. "You are still operating under the delusion that this is a family dispute about a declined credit card. You think this is about me being petty over a wedding invitation. I need to walk you through the reality of the American financial legal system, because ignorance is not a valid defense in federal court." I raise a single finger, ticking off the points with cold mathematical precision. When you steal a social security number and open a fraudulent account, that is identity theft. When you use that account to extract funds, that is bank fraud. But those are just the foundational crimes, Jamal. The real problem, the problem that is currently wearing a dark blue uniform and asking for your passport, is the geography and the math. I watched Jamal swallow hard, his eyes wide and unblinking. There are automatic triggers built into international banking regulations. I explained smoothly. When a transaction exceeds $50,000, it requires a secondary layer of verification. When that transaction originates from a foreign IP address, but is tied to a domestic American entity, it triggers a tertiary security protocol. And when that exact account was proactively flagged for synthetic identity fraud just hours prior, the system does not just lock the card, it trips a federal tripwire. I pause, letting the term sink in. A federal tripwire. "You did not just try to buy a party," I tell my brother, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "You attempted to electronically transmit $85,000 of stolen credit across international borders. That is the textbook definition of international wire fraud. It is a Title 18 United States Code Section 1343 violation. It carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in a federal penitentiary, per count. And you have swiped that card 17 times since you arrived in Paris." My mother lets out a choked gasp. 20 years. She whispers the words, barely making it past her lips. She looks at Jamal, the golden child, the boy she swore was destined for greatness, and finally sees him for what he is: a massive criminal liability. But the automated system was just the beginning. I continue, refusing to give them a single second to process the shock before dropping the next anvil. "You accused me of waiting to spring a trap. You were right. But I was not just sitting on my sofa drinking wine and waiting for your card to decline. I was working." I reach out and drag a digital folder from my left monitor to the center screen. I maximize the window so the glow illuminates my features. For the past 8 days, while Chloe was posting aesthetic updates about her floral arrangements, and you were bragging to the country club, I was compiling a comprehensive digital dossier. I tell them. I gathered every single piece of evidence. I pulled the device identification addresses. I tracked the time-stamped network logs, showing exactly when and where the fake corporate entity was registered. I compiled the forged electronic signature documents. I pulled the historical data proving Jamal had no legitimate income to support the credit application. I bundled it all into a single, perfectly organized, encrypted file. Chloe begins to hyperventilate. She drops to the ground next to Jamal, her designer dress pooling in the dirt. She grabs her own hair, pulling at the elaborate bridal updo until pins scatter across the gravel. "What did you do?" she shrieks, her voice raw and jagged. "What did you do?" "Charmaine? I submitted it," I answer simply. I submitted the entire dossier directly to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that follows the acronym FBI is heavier than lead. It presses down on the courtyard, suffocating the last remaining embers of their arrogance. My father's knees actually buckle. He has to grab the stone pillar of the gate to keep himself from collapsing completely. He is a man who built his entire life on the appearance of respectability. He goes to church on Sundays. He plays golf with local politicians. The concept of the FBI actively possessing a criminal dossier on his son is a reality his brain simply cannot compute. You called the FBI on your own brother, Elaine whispers. Her voice is completely hollow. There is no anger left, only a vacant, sprawling horror. I did not call them Elaine. I correct her, my tone completely flat. Calling them implies a conversation. I provided them with a fully authenticated chain of digital evidence proving a massive ongoing international fraud ring. They did not need to ask me any questions. The data spoke for itself. But there was one logistical problem. I add, leaning back and resting my hands in my lap. The FBI operates domestically. Their jurisdiction ends at the American border, and since you were all so incredibly determined to have this wedding at a historic French chateau, you were sitting far outside their immediate physical reach. Jamal looks up at me. His eyes are entirely bloodshot. He is breathing in short, ragged gasps, so I had to ensure that the message was properly relayed. I tell him, I contacted the fraud division of the card issuer and provided them with the FBI case number. The bank, acting in accordance with international financial treaties, immediately notified the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol. Dexter says the word as if it is a curse. He looks at the French officers standing just a few feet away. They are currently speaking aggressively to Monsieur Laurent, clearly gathering the details of the immediate situation. Yes, Dexter, Interpol, I confirm. Because Jamal is not just a guy who maxed out a credit card. In the eyes of the global financial system, he is an active flight risk currently attempting to defraud a European business using a stolen American identity. Those officers behind you are not here to negotiate a payment plan. They are not here to listen to your excuses about venture capital or silent partners. They are here because the international banking system has flagged your son as a high-level economic threat. I watch the realization wash over them, the sheer inescapable totality of their destruction. They cannot yell their way out of this. They cannot gaslight the FBI. They cannot manipulate Interpol by claiming my negative energy ruined the aesthetic. They are trapped in a cage made of their own entitlement, and the locks are entirely digital controlled by the woman they threw away. Please, Jamal whispers. It is a pathetic broken sound. Please, Charmaine, call them back. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you gave me permission. I will do anything. You cannot unring a bell, Jamal. I reply, my voice completely devoid of emotion. And you certainly cannot unring a federal criminal investigation. Even if I called them right now and claimed I was lying, they would simply charge me with filing a false federal report, and they would still prosecute you based on the digital evidence. The machine is already moving. I just push the start button. One of the French officers finally steps forward, abandoning his conversation with the estate manager. He walks directly up to Jamal. The officer barks a command in sharp, authoritative French. When Jamal does not immediately respond, paralyzed by fear, the officer reaches down and grabs him roughly by the shoulder, hauling him to his feet. Jamal cries out a sharp yelp of pain as his shoulder is wrenched upward. The officer does not care. He speaks again, this time in heavily accented English, demanding Jamal's passport and identification. Chloe screams again, lunging forward to grab Jamal's arm, but the second officer steps in, holding up a stern hand and warning her to stay back. The absolute authority of the police officers completely shatters whatever illusion of control my parents had left. Dexter steps forward, raising his hands in a placating gesture. Officer, please. My father begs, his voice trembling with a terrifying vulnerability I have never seen before. There has been a misunderstanding. This is my son. We are American citizens. We are just trying to resolve a banking error. The officer ignores my father completely. He keeps his grip firmly on Jamal's shoulder and repeats his demand for the passport. I watch the scene unfold on my screen like a meticulously directed film. It is a masterpiece of consequences. My mother is weeping into her hands, her ridiculous feathered hat sitting askew on her head. My father is stammering, stripped of his patriarchal power, reduced to a helpless bystander. Chloe is sobbing on the ground, her dream wedding transformed into a criminal holding area, and Jamal, the golden child, is standing in the grip of a foreign police officer, realizing that his lifetime of avoiding accountability has finally come to an end. "You did this!" Elaine suddenly screams, pulling her face out of her hands and glaring at the phone. Her grief instantly mutates back into venom. "You set him up. You wanted to see him destroyed. You are enjoying this." I look directly into my mother's furious, tear-soaked eyes. I do not flinch. I do not look away. "I did not steal the identity, Elaine. I state firmly. I did not forge the signatures. I did not demand a $200,000 wedding. I simply stopped being the shield that protected you from reality. This is not my revenge. This is your reality. You built a house of cards on my back, and you are angry at me because I finally stood up." The officer pulls a pair of heavy metal handcuffs from his duty belt. The sharp clinking sound echoes clearly through the microphone. Jamal's eyes go wide with absolute panic as he stares at the restraints. He looks back at the phone, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. "Charmaine!" Jamal screams, his voice cracking violently. "Help me! Tell them to stop! Tell them it is your card!" I sit back on my velvet sofa. I take a long, slow sip of my wine. The vintage red is perfectly aerated, rich, and heavy on my tongue. I look at the screen, watching the officer pull Jamal's arms behind his back. "I cannot help you, Jamal," I say quietly, knowing my words are the last thing he will hear before the metal snaps shut. "You are not my family. You are just a man who stole my name, and my name is the only thing I have left to protect." The heavy metal snap of the handcuffs is the last clear sound I hear before the digital connection descends into absolute high-definition bedlam. The French officers do not move with the hesitant politeness my parents expect. They move with the cold, efficient intensity of state authority. Behind the officers, a second police vehicle screeches up the gravel driveway, its blue and red lights strobing against the ancient stone walls of the chateau like a neon nightmare. Monsieur Laurent, the estate manager, is no longer just a frustrated businessman. He is a primary witness. He stands with his arms crossed, his face a mask of iron, pointing aggressively at the stack of luxury luggage and the four panicked Americans. He is speaking rapidly in French to a superior officer, gesturing toward the main office where the credit card was declined. The word escroc, the French word for swindler, cuts through the air repeatedly. Chloe is the first to truly lose her mind. As the second team of officers approaches, she begins to shriek, a raw, jagged sound that vibrates through my phone speakers. She lunges toward Jamal, trying to wrap her arms around him as he is being restrained, but an officer firmly intercedes. He pushes her back with a stiff arm, commanding her to remain still. Chloe trips over the hem of her $200,000 Vera Wang gown, falling hard onto the gravel. She scrambles backward on her hands and knees, her face a smeared mask of black mascara and white terror. "My wedding!" she screams, her voice reaching a frequency that sounds like breaking glass. "You are ruining my wedding. Get your hands off him. We have money. We are important people." The officers ignore her completely. One of them, a woman with a sharp bob and a look of profound boredom, pulls a black nylon bag from her belt. She begins methodically collecting the passports that my father had desperately pulled from his pocket moments before. She flips through them with clinical detachment. Dexter, Elaine, Chloe, and Jamal. 4 blue American passports, now officially seized as evidence in a major financial fraud investigation. My father, Dexter, looks like he is having a stroke. He is gasping for air, his hands clutching at his chest as he watches his son being shoved toward the back of the police van. The image of the proud patriarch, the Fairfield insurance broker, who commanded respect at every country club dinner, is dead. In his place is a terrified old man watching his legacy dissolve into a puddle of international shame. "Officer, please." My father wheezes, his voice thin and pathetic. "There is a mistake. My daughter is on the phone. She is a high-level executive. She can explain everything." He thrusts the phone toward the woman holding the passports. She glances at the screen, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. I do not look away. I do not blink. I offer her a small professional nod. She looks back at my father, her expression unchanged, and pushes the phone away. She does not care who I am. She cares about the $85,000 fraudulent transaction and the Interpol alert on her terminal. Jamal is weeping openly now. It is a loud, ugly, infantile sound. As the officers begin to lift him toward the van, he twists his head back toward the phone, his eyes searching for me one last time. Charmaine. He wails, his voice cracking into a high-pitched sob. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me the card for the wedding. I will do anything, Charmaine. I will give you the house. I will sign over my inheritance. Just tell them to let me go. I watch him, and for a fleeting second, I remember the little boy who used to hide behind my legs when he broke a vase. I remember the brother I once loved so much that I would have walked through fire to keep him safe. But that boy died years ago, replaced by a parasite who thought my life was something he could just consume and discard. It is not a misunderstanding, Jamal. I say, my voice cutting through his hysterical begging like a scalpel. You did not make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to steal. You chose to lie. You chose to build your happiness on the wreckage of my identity. Now you have to choose how you are going to survive the consequences. The officer gives Jamal a final firm shove into the back of the vehicle. The heavy doors slam shut with a thunderous metallic boom. The sound of the lock engaging is final. Absolute. Elaine! My mother collapses against the stone pillar of the gate. She is no longer screaming. She is just making a low, rhythmic moaning sound, swaying back and forth as if in a trance. Her feathered fascinator hat falls into the dirt, getting crushed under the boot of a departing officer. She looks at the van, then at the chateau, then at the phone. Her eyes are vacant. The dream is over. The social status she traded her daughter's soul for has evaporated in a cloud of diesel exhaust and blue police lights. Monsieur Laurent approaches my parents. He speaks in clipped, icy English. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal items from the lobby. After that, the gates will be locked and your luggage will be moved to the public road. You are no longer guests of this estate. You are a legal liability. Chloe lets out a fresh scream of indignation, but it has no power. She is just a girl in a dirty white dress standing on the side of a road she does not recognize. The vendors have already finished packing their trucks. The string quartet has disappeared. The flowers are being loaded into a compost bin. The $200,000 wedding has officially been rebranded as a crime scene. I sit in the silence of my Manhattan penthouse, watching the scene on the screen move further and further away as the phone is dropped or moved. I see the police van pulling away its lights, disappearing down the long, tree-lined lane. I see the massive iron gates of the chateau slowly swinging shut. I reach out and tap the end call button. The screen goes black, reflecting my own face in the dim light. My apartment is perfectly still. The only sound is the distant hum of the New York traffic 30 floors below. I pick up my wine glass and finish the last of the vintage red. It tastes like iron and victory. For 35 years, I was the one standing on the outside of the gates watching them celebrate. I was the one who was never enough. I was the one who had to earn her place, pay her way, and apologize for her success. Tonight, I am the only one who is truly home. I walk over to my dual monitors and begin the final phase of the cleanup. I send a pre-written email to my legal team and the fraud investigators at the bank, confirming that I am not seeking restitution from the family, but that I am proceeding with all federal charges for identity theft. I do not want their money. I do not want their apologies. I want the legal record to reflect exactly who they are. I look at the clock. It is nearly 3 in the morning. In France, the sun is high in the sky over a wedding that never happened. I imagine my parents standing on the side of the road with their Louis Vuitton suitcases watching the guests arrive at the hotels nearby, having to explain that the golden child is currently sitting in a holding cell at the local prefecture. A small, genuine smile spreads across my face. I walk to my bedroom, strip off my silk robe, and crawl into my high thread count sheets. For the first time in my entire life, I do not feel the weight of Fairfield, Connecticut on my chest. I do not feel the cold blue walls of my childhood room. I do not feel the crushing pressure of being the strong one, the provider, the bridge. I close my eyes and let the silence pull me under. Tomorrow, the news will break. Tomorrow, the country club will be buzzing with the scandal of the century. Tomorrow, my phone will ring again with lawyers and investigators, and perhaps even more desperate pleas for mercy. But tonight, I am going to sleep like a woman who finally knows exactly what she is worth, and I know with absolute certainty that no one will ever be able to afford me again. I wake up 8 hours later to a city bathed in bright, unforgiving morning light. My phone is a graveyard of notifications. There are over 200 new messages. My social media is tagged in dozens of posts from Chloe's confused bridesmaids and angry wedding guests. I ignore them all. I make a cup of black coffee and stand by the window. The world looks the same, but I am different. I feel lighter. I feel dangerous. I feel like a woman who has finally claimed her own name. I think about Jamal sitting in that cell. I think about the look on his face when the handcuffs snapped shut. I think about the fact that he probably still thinks this is just a temporary setback. He probably still thinks mom and dad will find a way to fix it. He has never understood that some fires cannot be put out. Some bridges do not just burn, they vaporize. I spend the morning systematically disconnecting every remaining tie. I close the shared family phone plan. I cancel the insurance policies I was subsidizing for my father's office. I redirect the property tax bills for the Fairfield house back to my parents' personal address. I am not being cruel. I am being precise. I am removing the life support from a system that tried to kill me. By noon, my lawyer calls. Charmaine, the bank has officially filed their formal report with the FBI, he says. His voice is professional, but I can hear the underlying shock. They are moving fast. Because of the international nature of the fraud and the total amount involved, the U.S. Attorney's Office is taking the lead. They want to set up a formal deposition with you on Monday. I tell him I will be there. I tell him I have all the documentation ready. Do you want to know about your brother? He asks after a pause. No, I reply. I already know everything I need to know about him. I hang up the phone and look at the upstate cabin listing on my computer screen. It has already received 3 inquiries. By next week, that part of my life will be gone too. I think about the black tax one last time. I think about the millions of people who are currently being drained dry by families who use loyalty as a weapon. I think about the girls sitting in blue rooms right now wondering why their straight A's are not enough to buy their parents' love. I wish I could tell them that the answer is not in the grades or the money or the sacrifice. The answer is in the moment you realize that you are the one holding the power. The answer is in the moment you decide that you are no longer for sale. I take a final sip of my coffee and start packing a small suitcase. I have a flight to catch, not to France and certainly not to Connecticut. I'm going to a place where no one knows my name, just so I can enjoy the sound of it for a while. As I walk out of my penthouse and lock the door behind me, I do not look back. I do not wonder if they are okay. I do not wonder if I should have been more merciful. I simply step into the elevator and watch the numbers count down to 1. The bank is closed. The account is settled. And for the first time in 35 years, the balance is 0, just the way it was always meant to be. The screen remains active as the French police van pulls away, but the camera angle shifts abruptly. My father Dexter must have collapsed or dropped the phone because now the lens is tilted upward from the gravel, capturing a low-angle, distorted view of my parents. They are no longer the towering figures of authority who ruled my childhood with an iron fist. They are broken. My father falls to his knees first. The sound of his expensive suit trousers hitting the sharp stones is a dull thud that echoes through my speakers. He reaches out toward the screen, his hands shaking so violently he can barely keep his balance. His face is a roadmap of desperation, every wrinkle highlighted by the harsh afternoon sun. "Nia, please," he gasps, using the name he hasn't called me with any real affection in over a decade. "Please listen to me. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I will admit it. I will say it to the world. Just call them back. You have to call the bank and the FBI. Tell them it was a family loan. Tell them I gave him the card. I will take the fall for it, Naya. Just don't let them take your brother to a French prison. He won't survive there. You know how he is. He's sensitive. He's not like you. I watch him grovel in the dirt and I feel a cold, clinical curiosity. He is willing to take the fall for a federal crime now, but he wasn't willing to stand up for me when I was a child being bullied. He wasn't willing to protect my identity when he saw Jamal snooping through the filing cabinets. His loyalty is a one-way street that always leads back to his golden sun. My mother Brenda joins him on the ground. She doesn't even care that her designer dress is being ruined by the dust. She leans into the frame, her eyes bloodshot and wide with a terrifying kind of grief. She isn't angry anymore. The venom has been replaced by a pathetic, syrupy begging that makes my skin crawl. Nia, my sweet girl, my successful, beautiful daughter. She wails, her voice cracking. We are so proud of you. We always knew you were the smartest one. That is why we leaned on you. We knew you could handle it. But Jamal is weak. He needs us. He needs you. Think of your grandmother. Think of our family name. Do you want the world to see a photo of your brother in handcuffs on the news? It will ruin all of us. We will pay you back every cent. I will sell the house. I will sell my jewelry. We will live in a tent if we have to. Just drop the charges. Please, Naya, have mercy on your own flesh and blood. I let them cry. I let them wring their hands and sob into the gravel for a long, uncomfortable minute. I want them to feel the full weight of the silence. I want them to realize that their tears, which used to be my greatest weakness, have no currency in this new world I've built. Finally, I speak. My voice is steady, echoing through the quiet of my Manhattan office. It's funny you mention the family name now, Brenda. You didn't care about the family name when you were uninviting me from this wedding because I didn't fit the aesthetic. You didn't care about our flesh and blood when you told me I was lucky to even be included at a brunch table. You only care about the name now because it's being dragged through the mud by the person you spent 30 years crowning as the king of this family. I lean forward, and though they can only see me through a small screen, I make sure my gaze is piercing. Let's talk about choices, I say, my voice dropping to a sharp rhythmic tone. Do you remember when I was 16 and I worked 2 jobs to save up for my first car? I had $3,000 in a shoebox under my bed. Jamal wanted a new dirt bike, and you took my shoebox while I was at school. You told me that family shares, and that I could just take the bus because I was strong, and Jamal was the one who needed a hobby to stay out of trouble. My father tries to interrupt, but I silence him with a sharp gesture. Do you remember when I got into Columbia University? I continue. I had a partial scholarship, but I needed help with the remaining tuition. You told me the house was too expensive to maintain, and that Jamal needed a private tutor for his athletic recruitment. You told me to take out 6 figures in student loans because I was the smart one and I'd figure it out. You told me Jamal was the one who needed the investment because he was the future of the family. My mother is sobbing harder now, shaking her head, but I don't stop. The list is long and it's been waiting for this moment for a lifetime. Do you remember last year when I told you I was exhausted and thinking about taking a sabbatical? You laughed. You told me I couldn't quit because you had already promised Jamal a down payment on his new venture. You didn't ask how I was. You didn't care that I was working 80-hour weeks until my eyes bled. You just asked when the next wire transfer was coming. I pause, watching them shrink further into the gravel. They look small. They look like the characters in a play that has finally reached its tragic end. Every single time there was a choice between my well-being and Jamal's comfort, you chose him. You chose his lies over my truth. You chose his laziness over my labor. You chose his entitlement over my existence. And even today, standing in the ruins of a $200,000 fraud, you aren't asking for my forgiveness. You are asking for my submission. You want me to commit a crime to save him from his own. Nia, it was just a mistake. My father shouts, his voice cracking. He didn't mean to hurt you. He just wanted a beautiful life. I smile, and it feels like ice. A beautiful life bought with a stolen identity isn't a mistake, Dexter. It's a predatory act. He didn't mean to hurt me. He looked me in the eye at brunch and watched me be insulted while he had my social security number in his pocket. He meant every second of it. He just didn't mean to get caught. I stand up from my desk. I move to the window, looking out at the city. The phone is still on the desk, capturing the ceiling, but my voice carries clearly. You keep saying I should drop the charges. I tell them. You keep saying I should save him. But you're missing the most important detail. I am not the one who sent Jamal to jail. I didn't forge those signatures. I didn't open those accounts. I didn't fly to France on a stolen credit line. I didn't attempt to defraud a historic estate for $85,000. I turned back to the phone. My expression set in stone. Jamal is a 30-year-old man who made a series of calculated criminal decisions. He thought he was untouchable because you've spent 30 years telling him he was. Well, he's touching the ground now. I'm not sending him to jail, Dexter. His own audacity did. His own arrogance did. And your enabling did. You three built this cage together. I'm just the one who refused to pay for the lock. Brenda reaches for the phone, her face distorted by the lens. You're heartless. You're just as cold as they say. You'll be all alone in that big apartment with your money, and you'll have no one. No one will love you like we did. I laugh, and it's the most honest sound I've made in years. If this is how you love Brenda, then being alone is the greatest luxury I've ever bought. I'd rather be a cold woman in a warm penthouse than a loyal daughter rotting in the dirt with you. I pick up the phone, looking at them one last time. Behind them, I can see the French estate workers beginning to move their luggage toward the road. The sun is starting to set, casting long, dark shadows over the courtyard. Enjoy the walk to the hotel, I say. I hope the bags aren't too heavy. But then again, you've spent your whole lives making me carry yours. So I think it's time you learned how to carry your own. I don't wait for a reply. I don't wait for the next plea or the next insult. I press the end button and the screen goes dark. The silence in my office is immediate and profound. It's a heavy physical thing that settles over the room. For a moment, I just stand there feeling the vibration of the city beneath my feet. My heart isn't racing. My hands aren't shaking. I feel a strange hollow peace, like a building that has finally been cleared of a long-standing infestation. I go back to my monitors. I see the logs. I see the reports being filed. The digital gears are turning, and there is no stopping them now. Jamal is on his way to a prefecture in France, and from there, the long arm of the U.S. government will reach out and pull him back to a reality he never thought he'd have to face. I think about the black tax one last time. The weight of being the one who made it. The expectation that your success is a communal pot for those who refuse to stir the fire. I'm done paying. I've paid in full with interest for 35 years. I pick up my wine glass and walk to the balcony. The air is cool, smelling of rain and asphalt. I look out at the millions of lights, each one a life, each one a story. Mine is finally starting, and for the first time I'm the only one holding the pen. I sip my wine and toast the empty air, to the bank being closed, to the taxes being settled, and to the girl who finally stopped being a bridge and became a fortress. Tomorrow the lawyers will call. Tomorrow the fallout will begin. But tonight, I'm going to sleep in a bed that belongs only to me, in a life that no one else can touch. And that I realize is the only payoff I ever really needed. The silence that followed the end of that FaceTime call was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a 35-year-old debt being settled in full. For the next 3 weeks, I went about my life in New York with a surgical focus. I didn't block my parents' numbers immediately. I wanted to see the notifications. I wanted to witness the slow-motion car crash of their carefully constructed reality. While I was attending high-level strategy meetings at my firm, Jamal and Chloe were experiencing a very different kind of French culture. Because the fraud involved such a high dollar amount and an international business, the French authorities didn't just give them a slap on the wrist. They were detained in a holding facility in Nanterre, just outside of Paris. Chloe's social media, the very thing she valued more than her own soul, became the primary witness to her downfall. Her bridesmaids, the women she handpicked for their aesthetic value, didn't stick around to help. Within 48 hours of the arrest, they had checked out of their hotels and flown back to the States, posting cryptic stories about toxic people and choosing their own peace. The internet is a hungry beast, and it didn't take long for the story to break. Chloe's latest Instagram post, a picture of her looking out over the chateau with the caption, "Dreams really do come true," became a graveyard of mockery. The comments were flooded with people asking how the food was in the precinct and tagging the FBI. One of her biggest sponsors, a luxury hair extension brand, issued a public statement within 3 days officially severing ties and stating they do not condone criminal activity. Watching her follower count drop by the tens of thousands every hour was a masterclass in digital karma. My parents, Dexter and Brenda, were eventually allowed to leave France after their passports were returned, but they were penniless. Every account tied to my name was frozen, and their personal savings had been incinerated by the initial deposits for the wedding. I heard through a distant cousin that they had to fly back in basic economy, sitting in the very last row of a crowded plane. Likely the first time in 20 years they hadn't been in first class. But Jamal and Chloe didn't have it that easy. Because I had filed the formal federal identity theft report in New York before they even tried to run that final $85,000 charge, the U.S. Department of Justice had already issued a federal warrant. They weren't just being sent home, they were being extradited. The morning they were scheduled to arrive at JFK International Airport, I woke up early. I didn't go to the airport. I didn't need to see the look on their faces in person. I had already seen enough. I sat in my kitchen drinking a perfectly made latte and checked the flight tracker. Air France Flight 006. It landed at 10:45 a.m. I knew exactly what was happening the moment those wheels touched the tarmac. While the other passengers were gathering their carry-ons and complaining about the long flight, Jamal and Chloe were being escorted off the plane first. But they weren't going to baggage claim. The jet bridge at Gate 14 was not filled with welcoming family members or chauffeurs holding signs. Instead, 4 men in sharp dark suits and windbreakers with the letters USMARSHAL printed in bold yellow across the back were standing in a semicircle. My lawyer had confirmed the details of the arrival. As Jamal and Chloe stepped off the aircraft, disheveled, exhausted, and wearing the same clothes they had been detained in weeks prior, the lead marshal stepped forward. He didn't ask for their names. He already knew them. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the narrow jet bridge, a metallic punctuation mark on Jamal's life of leisure. Chloe began to scream again, a sound that by now was probably a reflex, but the marshals didn't flinch. They weren't French police officers who might be swayed by a pretty face or a designer label. They were federal agents executing a warrant for a crime that carried a 20-year maximum sentence. Jamal didn't fight. He didn't beg. He looked like a man who had finally realized that the bridge he had been walking on for 3 decades had finally collapsed into the ocean. He was led away in shackles, a golden child turned federal inmate, while his wife followed behind. Her Vera Wang dreams replaced by a standard-issue jumpsuit. Back in my apartment, I received a short, encrypted message on my work terminal. It was from the lead investigator on the fraud task force. Suspects in custody. Processing at the Southern District of New York begins at 1 p.m. I closed the laptop and took a slow breath. The system I had helped build, the one my brother thought he was smart enough to outrun, had worked perfectly. He thought he was playing a game of family loyalty where the rules didn't apply to him. He didn't realize he was playing a game of data, and in the world of data, every lie leaves a trail of breadcrumbs. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my father. "They are at JFK. They are taking them away. Naya, please, you have to do something. They are in chains. This is your brother. How can you live with yourself? They." I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about the black tax and the decades of emotional labor I had expended trying to earn a seat at a table that was built on my own back. I thought about the nights I worked until my hands cramped while Jamal was out at clubs on my dime. I thought about the silence when I asked for help with my tuition and the cheers when Jamal got a new car he didn't earn. I didn't reply to the text. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I tapped on my father's contact, scrolled to the bottom of the screen, and hit the red button that said block this caller. Then I did the same for my mother, and Chloe, and Jamal. The digital cord was finally severed. There were no more calls to answer, no more fires to put out, and no more taxes to pay. For the first time in 35 years, my name belonged to no one but me. I walked over to the large floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city. It was a beautiful day in New York. The sun was reflecting off the glass towers, and the streets were teeming with people who were all fighting their own battles. Mine was over. I had stood my ground. I had protected my peace. And I had watched the people who tried to destroy me fall into the pit they dug for themselves. The payoff wasn't just seeing them in handcuffs. The payoff was the silence. The payoff was the fact that I could walk through my own life without looking over my shoulder to see who was reaching for my wallet. I had finally realized that being the strong one didn't mean carrying everyone else's weight. It meant being strong enough to put it down. As I prepared for my afternoon meetings, I felt a sense of clarity I had never known. The story of Nia the family. ATM was finished. The story of Nia, the woman who owned herself, was just beginning. And as I stepped into the elevator to go down to the lobby, I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I felt light. I felt free. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly safe. The bank was closed, the accounts were settled, and the world was wide open. I decided then that I would take that promotion in London, a fresh start in a new city where the only expectations I had to meet were my own. I would buy a flat overlooking the Thames. I would travel to places where the history was older than my family's grudges, and I would build a life that wasn't a reaction to someone else's trauma. I was done being a bridge for people who wouldn't even hold my hand while they crossed it. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out into the crisp New York air. The city was moving, and so was I. Behind me, the shadows of the past were being dragged away in federal custody. In front of me, there was nothing but the sun and the future I had earned with every hard-won dollar and every boundary I had finally been brave enough to set. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And that was a reality no one could ever steal from me again. The legal machinery of the United States federal government is not a thing that can be bargained with or manipulated by suburban social status. By the time Jamal was processed through the Southern District of New York, the weight of his decisions had finally begun to crush the life he had stolen. The golden child, the one who was always supposed to be the future of the family, was now just a number in the federal system. The evidence I provided was so comprehensive and so ironclad that his defense team had almost nothing to work with. There were no missing gaps in the data, no questionable witnesses to discredit. There was only the digital reality of his greed. Jamal was eventually looking at a sentence of 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary for a combination of identity theft, bank fraud, and international wire fraud. The man who had never held a real job was about to spend a decade performing labor for pennies an hour in a gray concrete room. But the fall of the golden child was not the only collapse. Chloe, the woman who had shrieked about family loyalty and ruined aesthetics, proved exactly how shallow her devotion truly was, the moment the cell door clicked shut. She did not wait for the trial. She did not wait for the sentencing. Within 2 weeks of their arrival back on American soil, Chloe's lawyers filed for an immediate annulment of the marriage on the grounds of fraud. She didn't stop there. In a desperate attempt to save her own skin and perhaps salvage what was left of her toxic social media brand, she tried to turn state's witness against Jamal. She claimed she was an innocent victim of his deception, that she had no idea the lifestyle he was providing was funded by a stolen identity. She painted herself as a naive bride-to-be who had been groomed and manipulated. It was a pathetic performance, and the federal prosecutors saw right through it. While they didn't charge her as a primary conspirator, they didn't offer her the immunity deal she craved either. She walked away from the wreckage of the wedding with nothing but a ruined reputation and a mountain of debt from the designer vendors she had promised to pay. The most profound destruction, however, happened back in Fairfield, Connecticut. My parents, Dexter and Brenda, had spent their lives building a fortress of respectability. That fortress was now being dismantled brick by brick. To pay for the elite criminal defense lawyers they insisted Jamal needed, they had to liquidate everything. The sprawling colonial home with the manicured lawn and the heated swimming pool. The house that was the center of their universe was sold at a loss in a forced sale. They had to auction off the luxury furniture, the silver, and the cars. All the trophies of their enabling were stripped away to pay for a legal battle they were destined to lose. The proud patriarch and his enabling wife ended up in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a run-down section of the city. It was a place they would have looked down upon with disgust just months prior. The country club memberships were gone. The friends who had toasted to Jamal's success at brunch had vanished like smoke. They were left with nothing but the silence of their own choices and the looming reality of their son's incarceration. They had sacrificed their only reliable child to save a thief, and in the end, they lost both. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after the arrest at JFK, I was sitting in my new office in London. My windows overlooked the Thames, and the sky was a beautiful, moody gray. I had just finished a high-level security briefing when my personal laptop, which I kept separate from my work systems, showed a notification. It was a VoIP call attempting to reach my old redirected New York number. I didn't answer. I simply watched the log as it recorded the attempt. A few minutes later, a voicemail transcript appeared on the screen. It was my mother's voice. She sounded small. She sounded tired. The shrill, demanding tone was replaced by a hollow, desperate rasp. "Nia, if you can hear this, please. We are in trouble. The apartment is leaking, and your father's heart medication is so expensive. Jamal's sentencing is next week, and the lawyers are asking for more money we don't have. We just need a little help to get through the winter. We are your parents, Nia. We love you. Please just call us." I read the words on the screen and felt a strange, cold peace. For years, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and panic. I would have been on the first flight to Connecticut with my checkbook in hand, apologizing for their suffering. But as I sat in London, thousands of miles away from the theater of their manipulation, I realized that the woman she was calling didn't exist anymore. That version of Nia had died in a French chateau. I thought about the word love. To my mother, love was a transaction. It was something you used to keep a host attached to a parasite. It wasn't love that made her call. It was necessity. They didn't miss me. They missed my income. They didn't regret the pain they caused me. They regretted the loss of the safety net that pain provided. I reached out and clicked a button on my terminal. I didn't just block the number. I disconnected the redirection service entirely. I wiped the old digital footprint of Nia the family ATM from the servers. The old number was now a deadline. It didn't ring, it didn't record messages, it simply ceased to exist. As I closed the laptop, I looked out at the London rain. I felt a profound sense of closure. The fall of the golden child was complete. The enablers were living in the reality they had earned, and I was standing on the solid ground of my own integrity. I had finally learned that the only way to win a game with toxic people is to stop playing. I had set the boundary, I had enforced the law, and I had chosen my own life over their parasitic demands. The black tax had been settled in full. There were no more payments to make. There were no more debts to forgive. I was free. I stood up, put on my trench coat, and walked out of my office to enjoy a quiet dinner in a city that knew me only as a successful professional. I was a woman who had survived the fire of her own family and emerged as something stronger, colder, and infinitely more valuable. I was finally truly my own. I spent the evening walking through the streets of London, feeling the cool air on my face. I thought about Jamal in his cell and my parents in their cramped apartment, and I realized that I didn't hate them anymore. Hate requires an emotional connection, a tether of energy that I was no longer willing to provide. What I felt was much more powerful. I felt nothing. They were just people I used to know, characters from a previous life that I had outgrown. I found a small, quiet bistro and ordered a glass of wine. As I sat there watching the world go by, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the legal fallout or the financial ruin of my enemies. The greatest victory was the quietness in my own head. The voice that used to tell me I wasn't enough. The voice that sounded like my mother and my father had finally been silenced. I was enough. I had always been enough. And I didn't need a single person from my past to validate that truth. The bank was closed. The accounts were settled. And the golden child's crown was sitting in a federal evidence locker. I raised my glass to the rainy London night and smiled. The story of Nia the victim was over. The story of Nia the survivor was already a masterpiece. And for the first time in 35 years, I was looking forward to every single word of the next chapter. The transition to my new life had been seamless because I had planned it with the same precision I used for my code. I had redirected my assets, secured my data, and built a fortress around my peace. I knew my parents would try to reach out again through different numbers or different people, but it didn't matter. You can't reach someone who isn't there. I had disappeared from their map, and I had no intention of ever being found. As I finished my wine and paid the bill, I felt a sense of immense gratitude for the software developer skills that had given me the tools to save myself. I had used my intellect to dismantle a lifetime of abuse, and in doing so, I had regained my soul. I walked back to my penthouse, the lights of the city reflected in the puddles at my feet, and I knew that I was home. Not a colonial house in Connecticut, not a blue room filled with expectations, but a home I had built for myself based on truth, strength, and the absolute refusal to ever be less than I am. The golden child was gone, and the strong daughter was finally gloriously free. I am sitting on the terrace of my new flat in South Kensington, watching the sun dip below the London skyline. The air here is crisp, carrying the scent of damp pavement and the distant chime of Big Ben. It is a far cry from the stifling heat of that French courtyard or the heavy expectations of Fairfield, Connecticut. When I took the promotion to become the global head of financial security, I didn't just change my job description. I changed my entire reality. My apartment is a sanctuary of minimalist design filled with art that I chose and furniture that I paid for, none of which will ever be sat upon by people who view me as a resource rather than a person. My life is now a series of intentional choices. I wake up to a view of the Thames, spend my days outsmarting the most sophisticated financial criminals in the world, and spend my evenings exploring a city that does not know my family's history. I have changed my legal name to Maya, reclaiming the middle name my grandmother Dorothy gave me, the only woman who ever saw me for who I actually was. I have moved my assets into private trusts, and my physical address is a ghost to anyone who does not have high-level security clearance. To the people who tried to drain me dry, I simply no longer exist. I am a shadow in the data, a ghost in the system they tried to exploit. The black tax is a heavy burden that many of us carry without ever questioning why. We are taught that our success is a communal pot, that we owe our labor and our peace to those who share our blood, even if those people are the ones bleeding us dry. We are told that family loyalty is absolute, a sacred bond that justifies any level of abuse or theft. But as I look out at the London lights, I realize that true loyalty is a two-way street. It is not a debt you pay to people who would never dream of paying it back to you. It is not a license for others to commit crimes against your future. I used to think that being a strong black woman meant carrying the weight of everyone else's failures. I thought it meant staying silent while my identity was stolen and my worth was belittled. I thought it meant being the bridge until I crumbled into the water. I was wrong. True strength is the ability to say no. It is the courage to set a boundary and enforce it with the full weight of the law if necessary. It is the wisdom to realize that you are not a host for parasites and that your life is not a forfeit for the mistakes of others. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped allowing them to destroy me. Jamal is starting his second year in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. From what I've heard through legal channels, he is struggling. He no longer has a golden pedestal to stand on or a sister to bail him out. My parents are living in that small apartment, struggling to navigate a world where they have to pay their own way. They spent 30 years building a house of cards, and they are finally learning what happens when the wind blows. I don't feel joy in their suffering, but I feel an immense, profound relief in my own freedom. The bank is closed, the accounts are settled, and the vault is finally gloriously empty of their influence. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, but sometimes you have to call the feds to haul it away. Protecting your peace is not a passive act. It is a fierce, active defense of your soul and your hard-won success. You are allowed to walk away from anyone who treats your kindness as a weakness and your success as their property. You are allowed to be the hero of your own story. even if that means being the villain in theirs. Have you ever had to put a toxic family member behind bars or cut them off completely to protect your peace? Have you ever had to stand up and say that enough is enough, regardless of the consequences? I would love to hear your stories of resilience and liberation in the comments below. We need to break the silence around these toxic cycles and remind each other that choosing yourself is never a crime. And remember, honey, in this world of data and drama, protect your credit, protect your assets, but most importantly, protect your peace. Because once you find it, you'll realize it was the only thing worth saving all along. Thank you for walking this journey with me. This is Maya, signing off from London, living a life that is finally authentically mine.